Good evening, Create community. It's always a great pleasure to be with all of you on Thursday evening. We're really enjoying discussing different topics in research with a very big vision of sharing knowledge, expertise, and identifying opportunities and common interest when it comes to collaboration in research and networking in research. We strongly believe that this will help all of us to sustain our research activity and shape a very wonderful future for the young researchers that we have in our community. Bashar Musa, I think for the people who attending C.R.E.A.T.E, they are, familiar with me now. I'm an associate professor at College of Medicine, and I'm deputy director of University of Sharjah Diabetes Center. Um, I think one of the very successful collaboration between our university and Emirates Diabetes and Endocrine Society is this group of webinars. It is a learning initiative that's been so successful so far, and it shows us how, collaboration can help different entities and different groups to make a difference when it comes to the continuous education in research. Just few instructions as usual to facilitate the webinar and to make it smooth for everyone. So right now, myself and our great speaker, Dr. Hamza, we are live now, and it's live streamed in the EDES YouTube channel. And also it is available on demand after we finish the webinar. So if you want, like the link for this webinar, you can just drop us an email. Also, it is, it's very important to know that these webinars, C.R.E.A.T.E webinars, are CMEs accredited. And if you have any feedback, question, or comments, please feel free to post it on the chat box. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce an excellent researcher and dear colleague, Dr. Hamza Zubaidi. He received his PhD from Monash University in Australia, and he's currently an associate professor and chairperson of the Pharmacy Practice and Pharmacotherapeutics Department at College of Pharmacy, University of Sharjah. He has more than 10 years experience in applied behavioral research and has focused for a very long time on health services, population health fields, diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, and mental health. Dr. Zubaidi is currently leading a multidisciplinary research group at the University of Sharjah, focusing mainly on healthcare delivery, managing chronic diseases. He has an excellent record of national and international grants, as well as a long list of publication in international peer-reviewed journals. He's also a regular reviewer for top medical and pharmacy journals. He has excellent experience in multi-center studies. I think I can say that. And today we will be leveraging his ability to communicate with us the best practice when it comes to recruiting participants for research purposes. The title of the topic today is Bringing Participants on Board, Strategies for Successful Research Recruitment. Dr. Hamza, thank you very much for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Prof. Bashir, and I hope people can see my slides from my side here. Sorry about that. Put it in the presentation mode.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much, Prof. Bashir, for the very generous and kind introduction. Good evening, everyone. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar. Before we begin, I'd like really to extend my sincere appreciation to the organizers, to the EDEC, to the EDES, and the University of Sharjah for their effort for arranging this event. Organizing these amazing events requires significant dedication, and I am very grateful for the opportunity to be with you today. Today, we will be exploring why recruitment remains one of the greatest challenges in research. I want to talk to you about what actually motivates people to be a participant in a research and why many of us decline. And most importantly, what the evidence tells us about the strategies that we can, all of us, put in place to enhance the recruitment. We will be also discussing the growing role of the digital technology and how researchers can balance innovation with the trust and meaningful community engagement. I really would like to encourage all of our attendees to actively participate through this webinar and through this session. And I hope you will share your experience, your challenge, and your ideas through the polls and discussions, because I genuinely believe that the most valuable experience and insights comes often from the, not necessarily from the presenter, but from the collective experience of those in the audience. Whether you are actually an experienced researcher, an early career academic, or a postgraduate student, or perhaps you are just someone who just preparing to start your first research project, I hope today's webinar provides you with the practical insights that you can immediately apply to your own work. Okay, I want you to think about this before I start my next slide. How many great research ideas never generate an impact because the researcher could not recruit enough participants? So recruitment is not just an operation. It's not something that practical thing we do. It's actually a very important task for the study validity, for the feasibility of the study, for the timelines, for money and budget issues, and even ultimately for scientific impact. So let's begin our journey. This is the first. I'll ask the audience to answer 4 questions through the webinar. This is the first one, just to engage you. So allow me to skip this and go to Pull Everywhere. This is where I want you to answer. So please scan the QR code, and you should be able, it will direct you to a screen. You don't have to put your name. You could skip putting the name if you don't want to put your name, and then that directly brings you to the question. And I want you to answer, have you ever participated in a research study? You could say yes, no. What's your experience in there? We've got very good number of responses coming through, but I will give it 10 more seconds for people to answer. Yep. So the question here is not that you, when I say participated in a research study, I don't mean that you conducted a study, but that you were a participant in a study. So that's what I want you to know, just to gauge from the audience. Majority of the people saying yes, some people saying no. We will give 5 more seconds before we pull out. Okay. So we've got rather an experienced audience with us. That's good. Let's move to the next question. I have only 4. 4 times I will ask you in the webinar to answer the questions. So the second question I want you, you should be able to see now. Again, just if you want to scan, I want us to ask, why do studies fail to recruit participants? Why do you think we cannot get enough number of people to recruit? Choose the one that makes the most reason. I am very grateful for our participants, such an active group of attendees. Well done. So we've got a split answers on these questions, and we don't seem to kind of get an agreement, but remains the most reason people think why we don't recruit is because lack of participant interests. This is a very exciting and very interesting assumption, because through the next slides, I hope that I can challenge this assumption, because the first default, and when I talk about this across many settings, it's often this is chose the number one response. So you have done it too, where you thought it's the lack of interest from the participant. And it's really an interesting position, because we seems to think we blame the participant as the main reason. They are not interested to participate as the main reason. Is it? Let's see together. Okay, thank you very much for the active participation. I'll take you back to the slides now. Okay. So I just want to share with you in the next two slides how big the recruitment as a crisis. Recruitment failure is actually a global problem across many health disciplines. Many eligible participants are never identified, and substantial proportion of the trials fail to meet the recruitment targets. Recruitment problems are systematic rather than an isolated incident. So if you are a researcher and you struggle to get a number of people to participate, this is not just your problem. This is a global problem. Happens in many settings, many disciplines across many countries. Just to put the context in numbers, what the evidence tells us, between 31 to 60% of the trials fail to reach their recruitment targets. Okay. And around 60%, we never identify those people. Now, when we don't recruit enough people, there will be recruitment delays, which will increase the cost. There will be prolongation of the study project, which may result in study termination. So recruitment participant is very, very challenging. And if we are lucky to recruit the people, we might have a trouble in keeping the people in the study or throughout the study, which we call it a retention. So an example of a retention struggle is actually, just I shared with you here, just the numbers, 48% dropout rate in the general medicine trial. When we look at the psychology or psychopharmacotherapy trials, we find the dropout rate reaches 64%. When we talk about any trials, any intervention in health services that ask people to change their diet, their physical activity, their eating patterns, the dropout rate, conservatively speaking, it's around 18%, and it could goes up to 37% of in times. So what have we learned so far? Recruitment is a global crisis, and people drop out. If they participate in types of the study, they might not stay throughout the study period. Okay. That brings me to, why should we care about recruiting? Why should we think about recruitment? Why should we design some strategies and tactics to encourage participation? Why recruitment matters? Well, I spent some time on this slide just to share with you a few ideas, because underpowered studies increases the risk of false negative findings. When there is representation bias, it actually reduces the generalizability of the study. And poor recruitment threatens internal and external validity. Let's unpack this together through some examples. So I'll give you first an example where, when we don't have enough people to participate, the study becomes underpowered. What this means. So there is a trial, and the aim of the trial was to recruit 500 participants in order to detect a clinically meaningful reduction in cardiovascular events. But due to the difficulties in recruiting, we were only able to recruit 220 participants. Now, this new brilliant intervention in the study may genuinely work, but the study lacks the sufficient statistical power to detect the effect. So the result becomes not statistically significant. So the researcher concluded that the intervention may be effective, may not be effective. We couldn't tell because we did not have enough power to detect the difference. So that's one example. When we don't have enough number of participants, the study becomes underpowered, and that really impact. So here in this example, the conclusion is that poor recruitment can cause us to miss real benefit of the intervention. Okay? And that demonstrates for you the power of recruitment. If I give you another example for the research waste. There was a randomized controlled trial comparing a medication with psychological therapy for general anxiety disorders in the UK, and the study was stopped prematurely because of the recruitment failure. What happened here? Years of planning, years of applying for funds, ethical approval, staff effort, participant contribution, were all ultimately unable to answer the original research question. So the conclusion throughout this example that I shared with you is that sometimes recruitment problems do not just weaken the study, but actually prevent the study from answering its original research question altogether. Let me give you different examples about cost and delays. So a study was planned for 18 months originally, and it has to extend it to 30 months or longer, which increases the staff salary, the site cost, the monitoring expenses, administrative burden, and the funding agency here had to give an additional support to the study because they could not recruit on time. So every extra month spent in recruiting the participant was a month spent not generating the evidence. Perhaps one of the last examples I want to give you is where the external validity is compromised. Let's have an imagination of a diabetes trial that recruited predominantly highly educated participant, people who speaks English. They live in urban residents, and those individuals already engaged with the healthcare. Now, can we confidently speaking, if this trial was done in this fashion, can we say the findings of this trial can be extrapolated to people who live in rural area, to the ethnic minority groups, to people with lower health literacy, to individuals with multimorbidity? So the study can have an excellent internal validity, very well designed study, but still fails to represent the people who will ultimately receive this intervention or this health services. And again, as a last point and a last remark, we could have, when we don't have enough number of people, we could run into representation bias. And what we know through the literature, through the evidence base, we have historically a lot of evidence saying that many clinical studies underrepresented women, older people, ethnic minority populations, and individuals with complex chronic conditions. As a result, healthcare providers and clinicians were sometimes making treatment decisions based on evidence generated from population that looked very different from their patients. Okay. So this is the time for when we ask you the third questions for today. I want to take you to the poll again, and let's see the third question. Give it a second. You should be able to see it active now. Yes? Okay. I want you to imagine yourself a research participant, and I'm coming up to you with a study, and I'm not telling you what the study is, and I want you to be part of our study. What would motivate you to be a participant? This is where you write. I hope it's active, and I hope that you can see. So what will be the motives? What makes you to participate? As people is trying to come up, good supervisor. Okay, great response. An offer. Okay, that's interesting. We will talk about that. Guidance from our research mentors. Okay, so if it doesn't allow, like people says, working from home or online, which I means that if it doesn't require you to travel, if it's easy for you to participate, flexibility of timings, excellent response. Contribution to science, another brilliant one. Gaining knowledge, okay, excellent. This is rather a very detailed response. I really appreciate that. And flexible timings, convenience to participation.
Yeah, Dr. Hamza, if you can enlarge the QR because there is some people saying that it is too small, they couldn't scan it. Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you, Professor. The study topics, if they are interested, if it's easy access to the site, people are saying, I want to contribute, therefore I feel it's my duty to participate. If I am interested, if the study design is good, interesting topic coming up again. I'm coming back to see if I've missed some of the answers here. So no trouble, easy to participate, trust in the researcher, trust in the institution. If there is a sense of contribution, what a great responses from the attendees. Again, I really congratulate all of you for having a really meaningful answers. Well done. Excellent. So helping other colleagues, that's a brilliant reasons. And some of us do it out of the sense of I want to contribute, I want to help colleagues. And yeah, so that's a very good motive for why I participate in research. Yep. For a Thursday night, and you are that active and that great response, this is heartwarming. This is just fantastic. Okay. If it is short, I come back to this point in the slides to come. I will come back to this. This is a very important thing. Excellent point. Yep. We've got a great responses. Great responses. Okay. So you made my life much easier because you've highlighted already the motives. So for the motives, you have said, well, if our study is providing a new medication or a new drug, or maybe it's a new health service, or it's maybe new intervention, then people wanted to trial this new intervention. So they want to come to this study because they want to have an access to this new health service, or they want to participate because they are learning new health information. How do I lose weight while not having any side effects? Or how do I reduce my stress? Or how this new intervention going to help me to be more productive? Or how this will reduce my blood pressure? Or how this will reduce my blood sugar? So it's as a learning opportunity for some people, and some people take it as an opportunity to growth because many of those interventions would require us to do something different. For example, smoking cessation, for example, exercising more. So it's some people see it as a chance for personal growth. Others participate out of sense of feeling that I want to help others. I want to help other researchers. I want to help my colleagues, as you have mentioned. I just want to improve the healthcare because if this trial worked, then meaning maybe next they can extend this intervention for many people. So I want to be part of generating that evidence. And I want just to contribute to the society and for the benefit of everybody. So if I could dedicate my time to this, this will be the way to go forward. Last reasons, it's revolving around the trust. I will participate if I really know the research team. If I trust those researchers, if I trust these are by scientists I respect, I trust them. If the institution, it's the biggest hospital, I trust the hospital, I trust the university, I've trust the medical field, I've trust the government, I've trust the one that conducting the study, or if I trust the healthcare professionals who's conducting this study. So trust is another motive for doing this. But I will say you gave me beyond what I was hoping for because you provided more answers to the slides. But these are the major things. What I will gain as my own personal things, or sense of contribution, or trust. And evidence tells us that the trust is a major driver. The last time where we go to the poll everywhere. Now, this is the last time I will ask you to do it. So please keep up your great participation because you are giving brilliant answers. So we're going to go for the last one. This is an enlarged and you should be able to see it. Type one word that describe why people avoid research participation. One word. Now we have learned what could be a driver.
Can
What?
you enlarge, Dr. Hamza, sorry, can you enlarge the QR? Yes, thank you very much.
Sure. Workload, time, like workload time. I don't have enough time. Um, Fear, there's another one. So no time, fear. I'm not aware. I don't see the advertisement for the study, so I wasn't aware of where the study is. Um, so time is coming a lot throughout the responses. So time is becoming central issue. Uh, Excellent workload. If it's difficult or consuming, privacy is another issue that's coming up. Um, if it's demanding, if the participation requires me to travel, if it's for a long period of time. Yeah, time remains as the most cited things, but you are talking about if it cost me anything. So if there's a cost, fear of commitment of this. If there is a lot of responsibility, I don't want to do it. If they ask me to do something different, okay. One more time, where the participants provide brilliant, brilliant responses. This is an excellent participation. Well done, you. We still have got some responses coming up. Yes, so you have highlighted to say if I'm busy, if there's so much of responsibility, if the study asks me to do a lot of things, if I don't have enough of information, if I'm concerned about my privacy, if I don't know about the procedure of the study, if it involves me traveling, if it involves any cost, I don't want to do it. And you provided and more of the reasons. Brilliant responses. When we look at why people don't participate or what makes them, or the barrier for participation, what we know, as you have mentioned, it is the time. So it starts with we all have busy schedule, whether we are students, working people, researchers. Um, it's just there's no enough time. If there's any practical issues around the transportation, if the study is at a location far from my home and they require me to go to the site, if mothers are responsible for childcare, like if there's any work commitments, as you have mentioned, sometimes we don't participate because if we are not having enough information about what the study procedure is, so there might be some fear. There might be privacy concern for some others by saying, who is responsible for my data, how they will use the information, why they are collecting this information. I don't want to share this part of my experience with this. If there's any mistrust in the procedure, this will be another group of barriers. And there might be some other issues of language. So, for example, I'll give an examples of this. When we design information sheet or when we design consent forms and when we design the information that we want to give to the participant about our study, we make all attempts to make them lay people. For lay people, it's easily understood, no medical terminologies, no jargons, no difficult concepts. But despite our attempts with it, you will be surprised to learn that many times you will see information sheet that are not easy to understand. Despite that, the ethical committees across the world makes a lot of effort to screen, demand, and make sure that the information sheet and consent forms are designed for lay people. And the language is simple, straightforward, short, detailed enough. But you will be surprised to learn how much of sometimes that people don't participate because they did not understand. The language use is too complicated. Now, when I don't understand, when the information booklets, it's sometimes overwhelming and there is no researcher that simplify the concept. You approach me while I wait for my medical appointment. You want me to participate, but you throw so much of information at me and you gave me 3 or 4 pages of information to read on my own and then to decide whether I want to participate or not. It might not be the best strategies for recruitment because I'll be feeling this sounds complicated and complex and difficult. I don't want to participate. So whenever you give hand information or information sheets, even if it is simple, even if it's detailed, make sure you explain to your participant simply in engaging manner what the study is all about. Make it a simple story and then tell them, here's these sections that provide you with detailed information. You can read them at home. You can come at another time to discuss it with us if you need more information about then the study before you commit whether you want to do it or not. Okay. So there are actually 4 broad evidence-based categories. Now we have talked about drivers, problems. How can we fix the problem? So there are 4 broad evidence-based categories of recruitment strategies that could work. So successful recruitment rarely relies on using one tactics or one tips. Rather, it involves combining multiple strategies to address both the motivational barriers and the practical barriers. So if we want to keep people in our study and we want to recruit people, we have to use multiple strategies. So I'll share some of those strategies now. You please feel free to write in the chat box if you have used different strategies that worked throughout your experience. So social relationship influence decisions. Like, for example, when we use community champions to promote our study, it helps people to participate. When we use patient advocates, when we engage and we talk to the doctors, to the clinicians, to help us recruit as a referral. If we tell them that this is our study and this is what's happening in the hospital, if you find perhaps a potential eligible participant, could you refer them to our study? So the involvement of the healthcare providers and the clinician could really sometimes increase participation. Sometimes when we use testimonials from a previous participant in our study, if they participate, they like the study, they like the procedures, they enjoy it. And if they write short, engaging, captivating testimonial statement, that sometimes encourage other people to participate. And often I will always come back to the trust, because the trust is often the transferred through the existing relationship, because it is the gateway for participation. Okay. I will want to spend about reducing the barriers and the cognitive burden. So sometimes the best recruitment strategies is simply making the participation easy. Make your study easy. You have talked about it, the participant text about saying, if I'm doing a cross-sectional survey, I want the survey to be short. I don't want to collect all types of information. I keep it simple, short, to the point. So when it's short, people participate. When it's complex procedure, people tend to say, no, thank you. Discuss simplifying your consent form, reducing the questionnaire burden, offering flexible participation methods. All of you have said, if the participation in the study can be done during the afternoons, evening, during the weekends, it gives a lot of flexibility and helps people. Reminders. Reminders is one of the techniques to encourage participation. We can talk about how do we do those. I'll take you to the next one, which is talking about incentives. And some of our brilliant attendees, they have highlighted that one of the drivers or the reasons why I participate, if there is any sort of compensation for my time. So sometimes we use the word incentives, and what we mean is just an acknowledgement to the time and the contribution for the participants. There are different types of incentives, and please let me emphasize when I talk about it as the word, when I use incentives, it should never be used to coerce or to force participation from ethical point of view. And the ethics committee often takes a very close look when you say, I want to use something to encourage participation. It has to be something just to acknowledge the time, the willingness that they share their experience. So there is a lot of way we can do that. It could be free parking tickets. It could be lottery prize withdrawal. It could be a small tokens of appreciations that could go for simple groceries, for examples. But it should not be a means or a big of money-wise, because then it will force people to participate despite they might not be interested, but they do it for the money. So it should be just enough to acknowledge the time, but never to coerce participation. Okay. Now, perhaps all of this is just to talk about we live at the time of technology and we live at the era of the digital health. So the question is, do you believe that technology can resolve all our recruitment problems? So think about that. And if you have any feedback or experience that you want to share with us, feel free to put them in the chat box. Perhaps toward the end of the webinar, we could get, if we have enough time, we could talk about your comments, or we can take a couple of questions around that. But the question I'm posing with you is that we have a digital recruitment technology which really can work. So let's have a look here. In this slide, you are seeing an example of technology, and you see they are color coded. And in the slide, you are clearly, I demonstrate how much it increases participation or the efficacy of these technology to do them. So I can give you a personal experience in one of the projects. We have done an advertisement using the posters. We have put flyers. We have went to the physicians and said, we give them study information and we said, please, This is the trial we are doing. If you think might be an potentially eligible participant who might be interested, please help us to recruit. So we've used healthcare providers, we've used posters, we've used advertising materials, we put flyers, we hand out in different languages, or we've used direct and indirect strategies. Did you know what really increased or was the most effective tactics when we use social media platforms? When we kept them very short and under 30 seconds, and we've used those things. Many people nowadays, we live at the time of the social media. So we sometimes we can use it for our own advantage. So when we use the social media platforms, it maximizes the reach. It sometimes is a very low cost, and it helps you to recruit hard to reach group of people. And this is consistent with what the literature is telling us. Sometimes when we say, this is a brief information about our study, all the more details is in our website of the study. So people can access it using links and they can provide more information. You don't have to scare the participant by giving them 7 or 10 page of written information. Everything is in the website, but the key information are summarized. That also helps you in the participation things. When you use an e-consenting forms rather than almost scary paper-based legal documents that you ask them to say, I hereby I acknowledge that I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can make them very engaging, very interactive, one page that they can simply just put their initials on the website instead of the paper and then takes them to the experience. So e-consenting tools also can work. Of course, using SMS as a part of tools like that also helps the reach to be faster, and it's also low cost. And we can use the technology to use specific algorithm using the medical record sometimes to screen thousands of patients to tell us who might be eligible. And then we identify those people and then we go out and talk to them and say, are you interested to be in our study? Because sometimes here's what happens. Sometimes researchers goes in a hospital or an institution and spend a lot of time talking about the study to see if the people are interested to fill out the survey, to come to the clinical trial, to come to the cohort to study, whatever the study design is. Only much to our surprise that after establishing that information and now the participant is interested, when we screen them for eligibility, they are not necessarily ineligible. So having those algorithms and those technology to help us identify potentially eligible people, it makes our recruitment more targeted. So that could also work. So I really would want you to think about direct recruitment strategies, indirect recruitment strategies, and using the social media platform with using these reels and those captivating things that under 30 seconds, when people are scrolling, they stop and they might be able to contact you. And I personally, in the recent times, I've used it in two big studies and they were very, very effective. Okay. Okay. Now, I don't necessarily have answers here. I'm posing more of both sides of arguments, and I want all the audience to be aware of the both sides of here. Technology can really help us, and there's a lot of advantages to the technology, and it really improves the efficiency, the reach, the scalability, the cost effectiveness, and we can give you lots of examples. But I think where the future is kind of a hybrid where we use the humanistic part and we rely on human for recruitment and we use the technology. It's never that one will replace the other or one is the only answers. And I don't necessarily have a solid answers for everybody here, but I really would like to stress that technology alone is insufficient. And there is a lot of downside to use this. For example, digital tool, as I show you, can really increase the reach. And it really helps us to increase the recruitment. But I want you to think, if our participant is in the 65 plus age group, and we go out and we give them these amazing tablets, and they go to see a very fancy technology-based questionnaire, they might find it struggling to answer those online forms. If they ask them to provide an online, you give them a link and you give them QR codes to take them to the electronic consent form, they want to participate, but they still don't really find it easy to navigate the technology. And also, even if the technology was easy and the older people actually been able to use it and navigate that, and by no means I'm saying 65 plus people cannot use technology. I'm not saying that by any shape or form. All I'm saying, some of the older people still prefer that human experience to explain that the study design, somebody explain the procedure, somebody invites me, convince me why my time is worthy, how my contribution will help, and guide me through the process. So what we can see now as happening in all the nearby hospitals and through my engagement with all colleagues at national level, even if technology was used, there's always that humanistic approach. We still send the researchers out to the field, help in recruitment, be out in the field. So sometimes when you give me QR coding and links and takes me to website, there might be some fear and distrust if this is kind of my information are safe in there. So we still, I think that where I want to land it is to say the future is hybrid. So where we have this hybrid recruitment models, it can combine technology with the human-centered approach. And I think that is where the most of the benefits is. Just to tell you, and again, just to share an example of a study that was conducted here across Sharjah and Northern Emirates, where we have used a paper-based human approach and we've used the technology. And we saw young people prefer the traditional ways and older people where they prefer to use technology. So there wasn't consistent pattern, but every time when there was a gadget or a tablet or a smart applications to use for in the study, it was always a great success if we never left the participant alone. If there was a researcher helping and guiding and answering questions throughout the study. So in the experience I had with this very long and complex longitudinal study, technology was a great tool, but with the human, not the technology alone. I never had that experience where I just relied solely on technology, but yes, it's just something for you to think about and to reflect on. Okay, so far we have talked about recruitment being a challenge. I've challenged the assumption that it's always that the people are not motivated. It's always the people are not interested. I think it's equally important for researchers to think about, make your study interesting. Make the why they should participate. You want them to participate for some reasons, but you need to rehearse on the, when you approach people, you need to have 3 reasons for why they should participate at least. And those should be easy, short, to the point, and think about presenting those. We have been approached many times to participate. Sometimes we say yes, and sometimes we say no. Sometimes the people are doing an amazing work. It's just really genuinely we don't have time. I get that for all the reasons that we discussed. But sometimes when I heard how they talked about the study, I was not convinced. I wasn't convinced as why should I give my time to this? I was not convinced on the why. I think there is a lot of evidence around the past 50 years coming from different disciplines telling us that humans are wired to listen to story. We like storytelling. So think about recruitment is a mini story about our research. We introduce the objective, we introduce why we are doing the study, what could be benefiting them. Sometimes there is no direct benefit for the participant, but it will be helpful for the general audience. So I really want to pause here and say, make your study simple, make your study design engaging, get the why, and rehearse your why before you talk to the people. And third, I really want to emphasize the importance of having the study translated in the languages. So not limit them to English only. Even if the people are having a good literacy in English, make it available in others, in Urdu, in Arabic, and not only in that language. Sometimes when they provide me with Arabic in my own language, but if it's not lay friendly, I still struggle with certain terminology. So it's not enough to produce them in different languages. It's always should be hopefully at grade 6 to grade 8 literacy. That is the best kind of literacy level that helps people to participate. As we are approaching almost the closing remarks for me, before I take any questions you may have, I'd like to summarize the 3 key messages here. Recruitment is a scientific issue. And for young researchers and for those who with us here today, I cannot emphasize enough how many times we have thought about all the kind of troubles that could happen in a research. And recruitment was not on my first until I actually went to the field and to find out, oh, oops, wait, I put 4 months as a recruitment time. And in many times I needed double that time. If it's 6 months, sometimes I go for a year to get the enough number of samples. So think about recruitment a lot and think about how are you convincing your people to participate. So recruitment is a scientific issue and the trust is the foundation of participation. And the future of the recruitment, I think it's a hybrid, as I said. And I want to sort of approach the end with a reflective of the questions. What one change could you implement in your next study to improve recruitment? I want you to think about that and put your thoughts into this. I will repeat the question one more time so that all of us think about it as a closing remark. I want to think what is the one thing based on the conversation we've had today? What would the one thing that you would think about to change or optimize in your next study or the current study that you are planning with the intention that you want to improve participation? Is it that you want to think about, okay, I have part-time researchers who will help me to distribute my survey. I want to do a mock interview trial and ask them to approach me as a potential participant. And I want to hear how they will recruit, how they will pitch the study, how they will talk about the study design, how they will explain the benefits and the risks involved with this study. So I want to do a mock trial with the people who are going to help me to distribute my survey. That's one thing that I want to do in my study. Others might say, well, one might think, I thought about the information sheet. I want to have a detailed information sheet, but I want to have another one that's summary, key to the point, and I would like to highlight those information. So it looks like more personalized. When I go to the site, I'll give them, I walk through the brief information, and then I will provide the detailed information because I don't want them to get scared with 7 pages of information and consent forms. The one thing could be, I'm going to use technology. The other people might say, actually, I want to rely on the previous people who participated to provide perhaps a recorded short video to say why the participation was meaningful to them. What did they learn? What did they benefit from participating in this study to encourage others? Others might say, you know what? We live at a time of um, digital tools. I want to come up with a very short video, creative video, could be generated by AI tools or could be generated by the research team to be played out at the site to encourage participation. It will be my tool to promote recruitment. Others might say, well, my one thing is I never thought about mass potential SMS text, but that could happen if there is ethical approval, if there is a company that can help to do these things, then we do it through the right ways. So I want people to think and write and text for us. What is the one thing that you want to do in differently? I am vigilant of time, and I thought not to keep it very, very too long. I thought just to, at the end, would like to really thank each and every one of you that you spend the time with us on Thursday afternoon to be part of this meaningful dialogue around recruitment is a challenge. And for those who never did any study, you might think it's an easy part where we think that, oh, designing the study is the main thing. And oh, it's about just the data collection and the analysis and to get a fund for the study. These are my major problems until you go to the field. And sometimes we discover that recruitment not always is a straight line forward. Sometimes it poses a challenge. So we need to think about time and we need to think about if it doesn't work, how do we maximize our recruitment strategies? Thank you, Prof. Bashir. I'm very happy to take any questions people may have.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. Hamza, for an excellent presentation and for a very engaging presentation. We've been running these webinars for more than 7 months now, and we had about 11 webinars, and we never used any of these kind of pull everywhere technology, which is a great actually idea. And thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences and your thoughts. It is very well done. Thank you very much for that. And I think when you start talking about it, you mentioned something so relevant to one of the main objectives of C.R.E.A.T.E, which is, like you have to establish a network if you need to end up, dealing with clinician, for example, or clinical teams in the hospital. One of the main objectives of C.R.E.A.T.E was to bridge the gap between scientists or people who are doing research outside the clinical environments and the people who are in the clinical environments. Because if you want to approach these people just to ask them for helping us with recruitment, wouldn't be a long-term kind of collaboration. But if you start dealing with them earlier and even, ask them for their ideas and their contribution, this is will kind of add to the power of the study and the recruitment later on. So thank you very much for starting with that and highlighted it. You mentioned that, and at the conclusion, I like the conclusion because many of the early questions that we receive, it's about research designs and what is the best one, just so irrelevant to what to your conclusion. But I would like to tell everybody who's asking about research design, this is how we start C.R.E.A.T.E by discussing a lot of research designs. And please refer to our YouTube channel. You will find all the research design webinars there. But let us start, with the topic of today, which is the recruitment and, the participants. I just want to ask the question related to what can be done before we start the actual process. You kind of touch on the, like a pilot study or some sort of feasibility study. So before we start the actual thing, what we can do so that we have a strong start when it comes to recruitment. If you can just, comment on that, please.
Sure. Prof. Bashir, thank you very much. What a great question. That perhaps helps me to share something I did not put in the slides, but I think it's very, very important. So your questions is about what can we do at early steps to think about maximizing recruitment. One of the most effective tool that I found through the evidence is when you engage the community, when you engage the people. What do I mean by that? You don't engage them as a participants. You engage them in the study before the study happens. So there is a concept is, I'm familiar, I think that many of us here on the webinar would understand the concept of co-designing of the study. So when we design the study, when we talk about the study design, and I'm sure that as you have mentioned, that this is the very important questions. Everybody says, what is the best study design? After you select your study design and you think this is the best one that will answer your research questions, you should always have not you should, it's a strong word, you are encouraged to have a co-design approach, meaning, I'll give you an example through a solid ones where we have used participants guiding us in the study design, guiding us in the recruitment, guiding us in the pilot study design, and then guiding us in the how do we maximize recruitment. They weren't part of the study as I did not give them the questionnaire. I did not give them the health interventions, but they sat with me in focus group discussion as this is what we want to do. This is the type of people we want. I'll give you a specific example. So in one of the studies that we've done, which was about, we wanted to screen for heart problems and diabetes. We reach out to people who have heart disease and people who have diabetes. We sat down with them, we did a PowerPoint presentation, and we said, this is our study design, this is what we want to do, this is the process, this is our recruitment strategies. Tell me, would you participate if we pitch it this way? And they said no. And I was interested in the no. And I said, why not? And they goes like, because you didn't tell me the most interesting things, which was that this new technology, this new device is available only for the intervention group and it's for free. If you mention this is a new device, it's a technology and it's a free, and then you're going to give me those results and I can take my results to my treating physicians. You will not limit them here. I can discuss them with my physician. I feel more trusted of this. I can have a second opinion about those results and I will get the options. So three things I want you to mention: new technology, free, and I have the freedom to take it to my physicians if I wanted to. And I said, well, point well taken. Others talked about saying that the videos on social, I thought we've designed the best promotional video. When we played out to them and they says too long, nobody have the time or the interest to watch 3 minutes video. Keep them under 30 seconds. That's what we want. And streamline. Here's what we think. Do 1, 2, 3. And some offered that they become the advocates for our study
Mm,
because they goes this. So for example, one of the male participants talked about saying, I want to be screened because gaining health will not only benefit me, it benefits my family. If I'm healthy, I can support them. So
mm,
health investment is not only for me, it's for my loved ones. It's for my wife, it's for my kids. If I have early risk disease, early risk factors, I want to figure out them quickly and be part of the study. Similar things in the mental health space. We had a co-design with the people. So my short-term answer without taking too much time on this, pilot testing is a great way. You trial on a smaller scale to see if it works or not, but engage and co-design with the people. So reach
mm,
out to your people. Don't invite them as participant, but invite them as potential experts to guide you through the study. So have these things, and they could be done it's repeated individual sessions or a group discussion once off
mm,
can be done online. And
mm.
I have done both techniques, and I ask questions, and often I think many of us have heard people who are closer to the problem, they are also closer to the solution. So
Yes.
sometimes they do have the techniques
Mm,
that we sometimes often as a researcher don't see.
mm.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this very detailed
Yeah.
answer. And we have here a question. I think it is like a case study because a person discussing a situation in which, I think, in his or her workplace, there is like
Yeah.
a workplace-based research. How can we ensure that the employee participation is genuinely volunteering and not influenced by pressure from the management? And at what point might mandatory participation become an ethical or legal concern? I think we can generalize this by talking about the last part, how we make sure that mandatory participation is not a great thing. Yes, please.
Yes, sure. So great question. Um, I'm going to answer them with a bit of sense of humor and then to the serious part. I get why sometimes as a researcher, we would love, I- I'm sure I'm going to answer scientifically saying we should not do that, but I understand why some researcher would want to think, how can we almost like force the participant to come on board and get the maximum number of people to join? But we need never to turn a blind eye to the fact that participation always is voluntary. And that is something that is a mandatory ethically wise by the ethics committee that in the information sheets, uh, even if it's the workplaces doing the research, and it comes from the managers or through the workplace people or through the HR of the workplace the environment, whoever is sending the survey or the forms to do a research, research never leaves the sphere of voluntary participation. People always have the right to decline participating, or even at a point in time, if I could still sometimes, like we have had it to say, if you do an interview, they could skip a question they are not comfortable with. If you give them a questionnaire, it's their right not to fill out certain sections. If they participated and they felt that they don't want to continue with it toward the end of the study for whatever reason it is, it's their right to withdraw their um, questionnaires. But we need to be upfront about these parameters. So I'll give you an example. When we had studies where we want to talk about experiences of people within mental health services, we told them that it's absolutely their right to decline answering any questions that they don't feel comfortable with. Coming, it was voluntary, but answering the questions is also voluntary. But we have said, if you volunteer to give an answer, we will give you the transcript back and it will sit with you with a period of 1 week. Read your answers. If you want me to use it, I can use it. If you are not happy, if you want to delete certain aspects, please tell us and we will delete those things. So it's not only it's volunteering to participate, it's
Mm,
volunteering to withdraw from any part of times and withhold any information that I don't want to feel shared. So to the question of our brilliant participants, when there is a hierarchical power, when it comes from people in the top management of my workplace, or when it comes from my treating physicians, or when it
Mm,
comes from my boss, ethical committee will look at these dynamics very clearly to ensure that the participants have the free will and they can say no without suffering from any negative consequences as a result of declining to participate. So if I come to this hospital and I decline to participate in the new drug, I would not suffer from withholding my treatment or changing my treatment plan or will be discriminated against. So these are standard procedures for any ethical study. And all our research, when we conducted with the humans, we have to obtain ethical approval. So part of
mm,
the review to ensure the voluntary participation falls on the ethical part, and they will demand from the
mm.
researcher to say, how do you ensure, what are your steps to ensure the safety of the participants and the voluntary participation? So, but I also wanted to add, she says, I get
Yes, please.
the sense of the question that we all think about how can we maximize participation.
Mm,
Maximizing is one thing, but forcing is another. So
definitely.
that is a different
Yeah,
territory. Yeah,
definitely. Voluntary participation is one of the fundamental parts of
right.
research. So, regardless how you are excited and you want to get more participants, always have this in your subconscious. I think one of the best thing about this, the engagement of the participant, and also, giving a real example of their own study. So, we have
Please.
Another question. A researcher right now, she's in the middle of a study and she wants to recruit about, I think, 50 participants who are 60 years old or plus. She asking or collaborating with somebody who's speaking the same language of the participant, which is a really great move to recruit a patient. But she said now in the middle, she start doubting that she can reach to this number. Any kind of special tips for her or for him?
Okay. So first of all, she or he have done the right way of thinking about the language and having those people.
Yeah.
I want to say to the second, rest assured you are not the only researcher that face this kind of a challenge. By that I mean we are in the middle of the study. I have a certain target number, which I based on sample size calculation to say I want to recruit this number of people. Halfway through the study, I find myself, I'm starting to doubt, will I be able to recruit or not? This is my tips will be, again, I would need more information to be more exact with my answers, but my general response to this would be there are many tactics and many strategies to be employed here. I'll start with the simple one, extending the time of the study and take the pressure of the time. That will help you to recruit more people.
Mm,
Okay, so that's the easiest way of taking the
mm,
pressure of time. Second things, engage in conversation with the researchers or with the supervisors or with the principal investigators and look carefully, what have you done so far? And that is, for example, I rely on a indirect approaches. Do I leave like kind of a advertisements? Do I leave like flyers at certain places? How people are seeing this study? Because one of the early responses we've got from our attendees saying one of the reasons why I don't participate, I'm not aware of the studies, and we
mm,
think the poster will do the job. What if I don't look at the poster? I'm busy with my phone, waiting
mm,
for my appointment. I was just looking through until they called me for my medical appointment. I miss out on that posters. I did not see it. And we
mm,
think that's the only way of doing that. So I want that brilliant researcher who asked the question, extending time is one,
mm,
reflecting on your current tactics of recruitment, and
mm,
then think about adding more to it. So
mm,
I'll give you some tips of more. So the some tips of more is, as we said, social media. Some tips of the more is making a record of people who participated in the study,
mm,
short testimonial things.
mm,
I enjoyed answering the question because, or the study was very helpful because I think we will all answer this question. If you have time, it just participate.
mm,
Something to this effect from the same group of people who already we want to reach to. Third tips, I will say, back to the point you mentioned, Prof. Bashir, about one of the main sort of aims for C.R.E.A.T.E as a platform. Trust means relationship.
mm,
Relationship needs networks. Networks can cast ripples of circles about our studies and what we do. So reach out to your colleagues, reach out to people who might promote on your behalf of the study. And we all have done this for our colleagues. We often would refer participants. We often would share an email with people. I text the other day another colleague of mine, a very dear colleague of mine, who I said, without outing your medical condition, but I do know that you have this. Would you be interested to answer this survey? And he said, yep, sure, why not? But how long it takes? And I said, 7 minutes. And he actually filled out the survey. So 3 techniques. Reflect on your current strategy, extend the time, try to reach out, increase your network to promote your study. I hope you find some of those
Yes.
helpful.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hamza. And by the way, there is like we're receiving a large number of comments saying thank you very much for your presentation. Great presentation. So a lot of
Thank
them
you.
is coming through.
Thank
You
you.
know, I think there is another point. Somebody, I think it is, like a desperate thought, maybe,
Okay.
it is saying that what about we start with a smaller sample size
Yes.
to kind of avoid all of that. But again, this is something to do with one of the fundamental concept in research. Yes, please.
Sure.
The floor is
Sure.
yours.
I will take this opportunity to say one more thing about the techniques outside the box. Can I share with you what I've used for the C.R.E.A.T.E when I received the invitation from you, Prof. Bashir?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so what I've used, I sort of engage in the last sort of lecture with our master students, and I said, you know what, guys, we are doing this webinar, coming webinar, and we will be talking about recruitment. You are doing your courses now. This is all about to serve the point of early preparation before even the study design to begin. So I said to them, you are doing your courses. None of you are actually thinking about study design yet. You are doing the courses now. But there is the upcoming webinar talks about recruitment. And guess what? All your project will involve a human.
Mm-hmm.
So guess what? You will do recruitment, no matter what your study design is. A case-matched one, a cohort study, a cross-sectional, a qualitative interviews and focus groups. It doesn't matter what you're going to do, but it does involve a human. So guess what? We will do this. Would you want to think about that? And I've got 2 of our master students said, yes, we want to think about that. I said, okay, here's what I want you to do. These are helpful lists about 2 helpful readings, and I'm happy to share those with you, Prof. Bashir, to be, I don't know if we can give them as a link for people who might be interested into talking about this,
Sure.
which are gives concrete reasons for why people don't participate, but also tells them about tips for increasing recruitment. And guess what? Those 2 master students thought about outside the box, and they start to think, oh, let's do it this way. Why don't you include that in your presentation? Why don't you think in this? So I'm not sure if they are with us today in the webinar or not, but I'm shouting out to Reem and Russell and say, great participation. The point I'm driving is one way to help not to have a problem in recruitment is to think about recruitment as we design the study early on. To the point of the question, I'm circling back to the question, which about having a pilot study. Pilot study is a great safety net, and it's kind of what we tend to do before we go for full scale big studies. We always want to test the feasibility. Does it work? Can we recruit people? Actually, this will be people would understand what we are wanting to do. Will they engage? Will they come to the 3 sessions that we want to do, or the 2 sessions that we want to do, or the 9 sessions that we want to do? Do they understand? Does it work? Do they fill out the forms? Do they leave it empty? Is it too much? Is it doable? Is it not doable? Before I go for my 300 participants, I want to try this on 30 to 40 people and see what that goes on. So the concept of pilot testing, it is to the core idea of, is it feasible? Is it doable or not? So I highly encourage testing the feasibility in some sort. But I'll circle it back to say, talk to the people about the general people, the lay people about your design, about your study, the aims of it, and the recruitment method.
Yeah.
Okay? They really gives you good insights. So use the participants because there is no research about people without the people. Don't use them only as a research participants. They can offer very insignificant insights. That's my another tip for doing this. Pilot study can work.
Yeah, thank you very
Definitely.
much for that. Yeah, thank you very much for that, Prof. Hamza. It is just the point, we want to elaborate on the point that when we're talking about pilot, as you mentioned, it's an amazing start to test, like the whole kind of recruitment process, but not for the full study. So do not, reduce the number of
Oh,
the
oh,
participant
mm,
just to facilitate or to make your life easier in the
okay.
recruitment. Because
Oh,
why
oh,
I want to comment
oh,
on this, because at the end say that this is wouldn't kind of risk the strengths of the research project. So I think they want to reflect on that as well.
oh, okay.
So it's not
Thank
the
you very
pilot,
much.
it's the actual thing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for helping me to understand the notion of the question. Well, in that case, then the answer is absolutely no. It's
Yeah.
categorically no.
Yes.
We
Yes.
we wish this
Yeah.
would be the case, but that's a very wishful thinking. And
Yes.
and I would think that but we all serious about research, and there is no shortcuts and there is no elevators to the
No.
process of a good research. Otherwise, we will all take that elevators. If it does not compromise the quality, if it does not compromise the integrity, if it does not compromise the outcomes, then of course everybody will go for the shortcuts. But the shortcuts are never the answers. Sometimes we by that I meant that pilot study is only for us to understand more carefully, but then we go to the full scale. It's never to replace the full scale of the things. So it's not that we decide, oh, we will cut the numbers of participants just so that we make the recruitment easy. No,
Yeah.
because you will be
Therefore.
underpowered. And
Mhm.
when you are underpowered, you cannot have enough number to show the significance. Back to the example I was giving, the 500 and the 228. When they
Mm.
got the 228, the conclusion was the intervention was not significant.
Yeah.
If they have recruited the 500, now I can see the difference between the intervention and the usual care. So the
Sure.
low number did not help me to actually make a meaningful conclusion about my intervention. So I was underpowered, no enough sample, it did not show statistical significance. So to the power to say you don't reduce the number of participants just because it makes life easy, although it's a very tempting, but no.
Sure. As you mentioned, there is no shortcuts in research. Research is a very challenging journey, but it's very rewarding, especially for the people who are passionate about research. Just for the sake of the time, last question. We still have a lot of questions, but last question to conclude the session. It is somebody is asking about the feedback of the participants.
Mhm.
Like, for example, when you approach them, they say this is too long or whatever. Is it good idea, do you think, to go back, as you said, to refine your tools so that you can get more people? Just last final
Sure.
remarks.
A very quick answer to this. Absolutely, yes, because that's the point of doing the pilot. One of the reasons why we do pilot testing is so that we get the feedback.
Mm,
And our intention when we say feedback, we don't necessarily want only to welcome the positive feedback that everything works. We want to give enough chance to receive a negative feedback for when they tell us that the questionnaire is too long, item 7 and item 14 was very confusing. I thought 7 and 10 is very repetitive. I did not enjoy the table format of the question. That was very tedious. I did not understand how do I score my responses. I want to hear all about that. So the reasons why we do the pilot test is to get how do we optimize these appearing negative feedback. They are nothing other than realities. And I want to hear these realities from the people who filled out the survey so that I can improve, enhance, and optimize my research tool. One of our uh, participants said, one of the reasons why we make the study more appealing is when we make the survey short, when we make the survey easy to fill, when we give the instruction about each sentence, each section, that's very clear direction. People will understand how to fill, what is one, what is five, what this means, and how they should respond to all of these things. So I think there is no great, in my opinion, I never saw any great large scale cross sectional survey without doing the pilot testing and get those feedbacks and without giving it plenty opportunities to hear for what the people think. Too long, too complicated. I didn't like this question. This was horrible and more. There is one concept I would like just to share one things for that particular reasons. I'm not sure if our audience heard about them. It's called cognitive interviewing. I'm not
mm,
sure if this is terminology is familiar to people, which is meant to mean. So I'll use the moderator as an example. So my very dear colleague, Prof. Bashir, invited me to fill a survey. Hypothetical reasons. She did not ask me to, but let's say that she invited me for this, and I'm a potential participant. So she invites me for something known as cognitive interview, in which what she wants me to do, she wants me to read aloud the questions and
Mm,
tell her if I understand the meaning of the question, not the she doesn't want my answers only. She
mm,
wants me to know if I understand the concept. This is done on very small scale numbers, and often it's an odd number. There is no rules of how many you do that. Three is enough. You can go to five. And this is not only to classic fill out the survey and tell us about your feedback. This is a designed qualitative interviews where I sit with a small number of people. Tell me if the intention of the question is understood. When do you do these cognitive interviews? You do them if you want to validate a questionnaire, if your study is about validation, and you
mm,
do them if your tools is new. Your tool has
mm,
never been trialed before. So
mm.
that's where you come up with your own questions and you want to validate that questions. You need to make sure people understand that. So this is higher level of feedback that you get called cognitive interviews. But definitely you need to get feedback and you need to improve. And you sometimes you listen. Sometimes, if you are not sure if this feedback is helpful, you park it aside, you discuss it with your research team. Should we amend this or not? And if you are not sure, you go and ask another participants about that particular point that is conflicting for you, which sits in the gray area. But often we always listen to the feedback and we adjust our tools based on these feedbacks.
Thank you very much, Prof. Hamza. I think we'll stop here, and I really appreciate spending all this time on Thursday night and staying very late in your office just to to give us all these kind of information to share with us your experience. And I think we always say research is challenging, but the beauty of having collaborators and having people like you who are volunteering their time to support other researchers. We really appreciate that. It's very enjoyable presentation. Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll have you again. Not now, later on. Don't worry. So
Anytime for you, Professor.
thank
Anytime
you
for you.
very much. Have a great evening, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, our C.R.E.A.T.E community, we do have our last webinar for this group of webinars. Will be on Thursday, 25th of June, with Miss Hamda. She is the coordinator of the research ethics in the DHA, and this is based on the request of some of you, just to make sure that we are aware of the guidelines, local guidelines when it comes to research application and research ethics application. Also, like we are very grateful to the Emirati or Emirates Diabetes Endocrine Society because it support our C.R.E.A.T.E webinars and on the same time support other interesting programs such as Meet the Professor that will be next, I think in 2 weeks' time on Thursday, 18th of June. Also, we do have another forum for young, I think I went too quickly, for young leaders when it comes to endocrinology. So if you are interested in any aspects related to endocrine field, please join the Wednesday, 24th of June, 2026. At the end, I'm very happy to finish this webinar with, our master program. If you are interested in diabetes research, diabetes clinical exposure, this is the right program for you. We have a 2 years program full of amazing kind of concepts related to diabetes, how to tackle all the challenges when it comes to knowledge, research, and clinical aspects of diabetes. So if you are interested, please just use the QR for more details about the program as well as for the registration. As I mentioned before, for all our participants, if you would like to get the CME's point, you have to make sure that you fill the evaluation form so that you receive the certificate in your email. At the end, thank you very much to our amazing speaker and to all of you for being so consistent in attending C.R.E.A.T.E webinars. Wishing all of you a great weekend. I will see you in 2 or 3 weeks' time. Have a great evening. Thank you.